And then this is the other song that you're ready to jam. Yeah. Why do you put that as a great blood when he's sitting down? Right there. Okay. Yeah, 346. Everyone agrees. 346.
Yeah, because it's so dry.
Yeah. Oh, this is the second one. That's why. Can you give me the other one? Oh, okay. Yes. Yeah, I have it here. Play that down. And then when I do this one, well, no, play the sit down.
Gary. Good morning, everyone. My name is Elizabeth Gonzalez, and I'm the chair of the Worship Arts Committee, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all to UUCCN, the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Nassau. It's great to see you all this morning on this wonderful Labor Day weekend, perfect weather. Today's service is led by Lindsay Beyerstein and joined by guest musician Gary Cupper. If you're new here, please know that this is a welcoming congregation, special community that supports one another on our spiritual journey. We are people worshiping together from many paths who are brave, curious, and compassionate thinkers and doers. We are here to help one another do the difficult work of seeking meaning, acting for justice, living with integrity, and walking with one another in peace and love. We hope that this hour set apart from daily concerns will renew our spirits, strengthen our love for one another, and embolden us to bring reconciliation wherever we find division. It's good to be together. Our speaker today, Lindsay Beyerstein, is an award-winning investigative journalist, columnist, documentary filmmaker, and broadcaster in Brooklyn, New York. She's working on a book about how conspiracy theories have conquered American politics, and we'll hear more about that later. And for today's land acknowledgement, we are here on the ancestral lands of the Merrick. We were put upon Turtle Island to be caretakers, to gather in a good way, to be with Earth's children in all of their forms, those of the land, the water, and the air. Let this land acknowledgement be the beginning of our return to unity. Let us be guardians of the waters, air, and earth, the four-legged, the flyers, the swimmers, the crawlers, the mammal people, and the green. Let us be the guardians of harmony and kindness. And for our chalice lighting today, words by Gordon McKenna. Deep calls unto deep, joy calls unto joy, light calls unto light. Let the kindling of this flame rekindle in us the inner light of love, of peace, of hope. And as one flame lights another, nor grows the less, we pledge ourselves to be bearers of the light wherever we are. Now, if you would please rise for our opening song, number 346, Come Sing a Song with Me. Okay. Sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. Come sing a song with me. That I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song of love and a rose in the winter time. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. Come dream a dream with me. That I might know you're mine. And I'll bring you hope when hope is hard to find. And I'll bring a song Now if you'll join me for a responsive reading about our shared Unitarian Universalist values found in your order of service. Love is at the heart of our values.
We promise to live our values every day with love at the center of all things.
Equity is the value of our inclusive community.
We believe in the inherent worthiness of all.
Interdependence teaches us we are all connected.
We will only be made whole when we live as co-inhabitants of the world.
Justice is essential for peace and building a beloved community.
We will work to dismantle racism and other oppressions in ourselves and in our institutions.
Generosity expresses compassion, gratitude, and hope.
We will offer our faith, ourselves, and our resources.
Pluralism encourages respect for diverse beliefs.
And allows us to be curious as we learn from one another.
Transformation allows us to adapt to an ever-changing world.
We are evolving and growing. We are never.
And now, as it is the tradition in our congregation, we light a candle with the intention of world peace. And we have a quote from Spinoza that Lindsay recommended to me. Peace is not an absence of war. It is a virtue, a state of mind, a disposition for benevolence, confidence, justice. UUCCN is a community of people who strive to be welcoming, caring, hospitable, and loving. We know that the spark of our joys can be amplified when we share them with the people who are cheering us on, and the weight of the burden of our sorrows can be lightened when shared with those who have committed to our mutual well-being. Now is the time when you may share a joy or a sorrow that is on your heart this morning. Please raise your hand and I will recognize you. Anita?
Well, this morning, Justin gave me great joy because it was so cooperative. He was saying yes to helping to put down pallets for our pumpkin patch. I appreciate that so much. And every year he seems to be like the first one who says yes. So again this year, he said yes, and he really helped me. That makes me very happy. Also, I got my gas coming home Thursday, Friday. Sunday, for the pumpkin, I was at help unload the flowers on the 19th. And tomorrow, I leave for Dubai. I come back next
I would like to share, I have, my wife is leaving me to Dubai, but I will say goodbye now tomorrow. But my other joy is that I have 3 of my grandchildren have started college this year, and it's exciting to see that they're actually growing up and becoming young women, and it's like full exciting. So I'm happy for them, and I hope that their school year is successful too.
Vicki?
Well, I'm the joy because my sister, my baby sister, she's visiting us from Florida. So we very seldom get together and have a chance to be alone. So I'm just, and also my joy has been a wonderful summer singing at the beach, and it's been a really beautiful, beautiful time for me, very uplifting. Especially now with what's going on in the world today, you know, the music to me is so important in our lives, just to keep going. But I have so much to be grateful for. That's another joy that a group of us went to watch Vicky, and we really loved it. I mean, I loved it. We're thanking for all that we do for the county, for Hempstead, and for us.
Yes, Mary Ellen.
Well, I have a concern of sorrow. Our daughter-in-law is down in Florida because her stepfather is not doing well. He's in hospice. And I hope you keep, what they call him, Papa Johnny, keep him in your hearts this week.
May we remember those who have spoken, those they have named, and those we hold in silence in our hearts. For announcements this week, I think the biggest one is that next week is our in-gathering and water ceremony, so please bring water for your summer. A very wonderful intergenerational service that we look forward to every year. Our first pumpkin patch delivery is going to be on September 20th, so we're very excited about that. We are looking for a RE teacher, so if you have anybody that you know would like to apply, we have a couple of applicants. We haven't selected anybody yet, so please let us know. Our upcoming book clubs, we always try to meet the last Thursday of the month. In September 25th, we're going to be discussing By the Fire We Carry, The Generations Long Fight for Justice on Native Land by Rebecca Nagel. We usually skip October because we're busy with the patch, and the week before Thanksgiving, we come back on November 20th. We're going to be discussing Unbuilt Walls, Why Immigrant Justice Needs Abolition by Silky Shah. So check the weekly emails for the Zoom links to those. Does anybody else have any other announcements? Anita, do you want to do the offering?
As usual, everyone, thank you so much for everything that you do for UUCCN. Your pledges, your donations, and volunteering sustain our congregation as we are 100% dependent upon our members and friends and guests. Please give today when the ushers pass the collection plate, or you can use a credit card on our website, uuccn.org. One of our traditions here at UUCCN is to share our Sunday collection plate with another organization whose values aligns with ours. One of our traditions is to share our Sunday collection plate, as I said, and for the months of July and August, we support the primary school in the Navajo Nation in New Mexico. The pumpkins at our annual pumpkin patch, our biggest fundraiser, are grown on Navajo land, and many of the workers who tend the pumpkins are Navajo. Supporting the education of Navajo children is a way that we can give back and support that community whose effort supports ours. Please help with this important work by giving today. And if you are giving by check, please write "Share the Plate Summer" on the memo line. And if you have suggestions for future Share the Plate candidates, please speak with the board member or email uuccn@aol.com. Thank you again for everything you do to support our congregation.
Satisfied.
some more in time. There's the one who satisfies mine. Life has ended, and time has run out. Friends and my loved ones, I think there's no doubt. One thing's for certain, when it comes my time, I think this whole world will satisfy my mind.
This month, I went to see My Undesirable Friends, Julia Lockhead's gripping 5-hour documentary about a group of friends working as journalists at Russia's last independent TV station before Putin's invasion of Ukraine. The same week, it was announced that Pope Leo was bringing his Augustinian brothers to live with him at the Vatican. An expert on NPR explained that in the Augustinian tradition, friendship is how we come to know God. And it's in that spirit that I want to begin our discussion of secret societies and their role in the conservative imagination. Friendship is subversive, especially when it transcends the boxes that religious and political authorities want to keep us in. I'm going to talk to you today about something a little unusual, about the Illuminati, an obscure brotherhood that has been haunting the conservative imagination for over 250 years now, and how the specter of a secret state within a state explains so many conservative moral panics throughout the decade, from conspiracy theories about the French Revolution, to the anti-Semitic forgery of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, to the Bavarian Illuminati panic of the early US Republic, the Red Scare of the 1950s and the Satanic Panic of the 80s and 90s, all the way to Trump's preoccupation with the deep state, which swept him to power for a second term. Historian John Roberts, no relation, writes, "Many institutions and ideas which have shaped Western society and therefore the world ever since were first crystallized in the 18th century. The central issues of European politics for much of the next 2 centuries were then defined for the first time. Men began to turn away from the hope of building a community on inherited subordination or religious unity. They began instead to envision a secular and voluntary society which would be a true community." In the 1700s, secret societies became, well, actually, let me back up a little bit. In the 1700s, the world became more diverse, more urban, and something happened that we came to call the associational revolution. That people started trying to figure out ways to be together, to bond with people who weren't necessarily from the same place, the same culture, the same religion, the same lifestyle. And that was really an epochal change, that we were transitioning from a society where everybody was bound together in a million different ways, being from the same place, the same faith, the same everything, to actually just trying to figure out how people can relate to each other without those, how we can build our own bonds between each other in a more diverse society. And secret societies were actually part of that people started associating themselves in these, there was this European-wide fervor, starting with the Freemasons, for getting together in these secret societies, often promising some kind of hidden wisdom or insight, but really what they were was a fraternal organization where people would get together, and it was kind of astonishing that that they would gather together to answer the problem of cosmopolitanism, which is arguably the central challenge of modernity. How can people who aren't from the same religion, the same place, the same lifestyle get along and ideally love each other? The proliferation of secret societies in the 18th century, of these, the best known are the Freemasons, who popped up in London in the mid-18th century and quickly spread across Europe. They borrow the imagery of stonemasonry and a networked organizational structure from lodges and trade, a networked organizational structure of lodges from trade guilds, though they probably aren't the direct descendants of medieval guilds as their in-house mythology would have. The Illuminati, whose story we'll get to in a minute, is a self-styled branch of Freemasonry. Freemasons have been scandalizing religious conservatives since their inception, in no small part because they've been uniting men of all religions and political leanings as brothers. Religious conservatives, including the Catholic Church to this day, also suspect their rituals of being kind of heretical homebrew religion, which is in general not fair. Masonic lore draws heavily on Christian, Jewish, and Egyptian symbology, and leans heavily on allegory, metaphor, and dramatic performance to teach moral lessons, but it's open to men of any religion. This was incredibly radical for the 1700s. The British Masons were welcoming not only Protestants and Catholics together, which was kind of world-shaking in itself, but also Jews and Hindus in the 1700s. There was even a Jewish lodge leader of a Masonic lodge in London in the 1760s. The emergence of Masonry was part of the great age of reform known as the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment began as Europe was digging itself out after the 30 Years' War, which is the last of the great wars of religion that followed the Protestant Reformation. Millions of people had died from warfare, famine, and disease before Europe came to the reluctant conclusion that the Western Church was never, ever getting back together. And people were going to somehow have to learn to tolerate each other, tolerate different religions on their borders and even in their communities. And the Enlightenment was built on the foundations of the scientific revolution. Reason was kind of having a moment, and people were saying, well, what can we do to reshape politics, religion, everything on rationally defensible principles? Because when we're overly reliant on revealed truths, God told me, somebody else says, well, no, God told me, how are you going to solve it? Otherwise, you're just going to have to fight it out. So there was this sort of general European-wide attempt to reconstruct everything and rethink everything based on rationality and knowledge and free thought. And which brings us to the Illuminati, which was a real secret society founded in 1776 by Adam Weishaupt, professor of law at the University of Ingolstadt in Bavaria. At the time, Bavaria was a duchy within the Holy Roman Empire. It was also a de facto Catholic theocracy. Heresy and blasphemy were punishable by death. A network of religious spies fanned out over the country to make sure that people weren't doing things like eating meat on Fridays because it could come back to you and you could be fined or whipped. Adam Weishaupt's father was a professor at the University of Ingolstadt, and Adam's godfather was a famous liberal reformer, Baron von Ickstadt, who had been sent to Ingolstadt by the Prince of Bavaria to drag the University of Ingolstadt, which was run by the Jesuits with an iron fist, into the modern world. And to put it mildly, this was not always easy. Adam's father died suddenly during a family vacation when Adam was 5, and his godfather took over his education. He was given the run of the Baron's library, which was stuffed with all the banned classics of the Enlightenment. Weishaupt was groomed to continue the Baron's work in battling the Jesuits for reform, and this happened pretty quickly because he was something of a child prodigy. The thing you're going to remember about Weishaupt, if you were playing in D&D, you would say, Dungeons and Dragons for those who aren't gamers, but you'd say this guy's high intelligence, low wisdom. But he became a professor in his early 20s and the chair of the faculty of law before he was 30. But change was slow in coming. He tried to convince the Jesuits to buy more liberal texts for the library and hire more free-thinking professors, but in part because he was an extremely histrionic and abrasive person, he didn't get very far. Sometimes they'd just stop paying his salary in the hopes that he'd go away, but it wasn't that easy. He decided that he would have to take advantage of the absolute mania for secret societies and found one of his own to combat the Society of Jesus. Weishaupt wanted to exploit the prevailing mania for secret society to bring the Enlightenment to Bavaria and hopefully to the whole world. Despite what the Illuminati's critics would later claim, they were not violent, they weren't revolutionary in that sense. What they really wanted to do was teach people to govern themselves, to imbue people with ethical principles and scientific knowledge so that they could govern themselves without the need for either government or organized religion. But they envisioned that this was going to happen over hundreds or even thousands of years. They were really influenced by the philosophy of Rousseau in the sense, the idea that the state could eventually wither away if people achieved a sufficient degree of enlightenment. But so people think of them as being some kind of religious cult, but they actually were kind of an anti-religious cult in a way, or at least a rationalist cult, if you want to call it that. But the problem was that wasn't really a great recruiting pitch, especially in an incredibly religious society that was all of a sudden hungry for, much like the New Age movement today, some kind of secret mystical knowledge. And Weishaupt thought, well, I'll promise people mystical secrets, and then we'll just gradually develop their critical thinking skills to the point where you get to the big reveal at the end where I tell them, oh no, there is no secret. That's the secret. And when he started the society, he hadn't even written the higher level rituals where the ceremony was supposed to impart the secrets. So the whole thing was a bit of a scam in a way. But instead he wanted to teach recruits about philosophy and science. His real agenda was to give them a university education that he wished he could give them at the university. A lot of their meetings were more like graduate seminars than mystical rites. They would do research and write essays and present them to the group. Weishaupt was teaching them critical thinking skills. There was an emerging demand for graduates with a liberal education because many of the developing bureaucracies of the Holy Roman Empire, which is over 100 different semi-autonomous states in what's now Germany, and all at the end of the 30 Years' War, they sort of think, how do we win the next war? And they think, we need more people. And that's not a very revolutionary thought in itself, but then they started thinking, well, what if we started taking a more active role in governing people's lives so that people could be healthier and happier and therefore have more children? So say we help them farm better, say we start collecting data about our society so we actually know something about them and we can make decisions. Say, we start taking some really basic measures to make sure they're not being, poisoned by contaminated products. The state capacity was extremely limited in those days, but it was the beginning of what political scientists now call state capacity. These governments were actually beginning to take an active role in people's lives. But unfortunately, particularly in places like Bavaria, which was a de facto Catholic theocracy, education was incredibly primitive. So Weishaupt was envisioning that his system, his society could start farming out its graduates. They wanted to be the sort of an old boys network to get their guys hired on as advisors to the enlightened despots who were emerging and trying to implement Enlightenment reforms without relinquishing absolute power. So the way I think of the Illuminati is that it really did involve elements of both sort of an intelligence agency, a management consulting firm like McKinsey, and a modern-day graduate school in a world where none of those institutions existed in their present form. So the group really began to take off when Weishaupt met a man named Baron von Nigg, a zealous Freemason who refashioned the Illuminati as a branch of Masonry. This was a key strategy for their expansion because Masonry had a public-facing presence and, to be perfectly blunt, nice lodges. So if they convinced the leaders of the Freemason lodges to become illuminated, so to speak, then they would have this nice place to meet and a network structure that spread all across Europe. And they thought that this was was a really great strategy for them. At the height of its power, they had about 2,500 members in chapters or lodges as far away as Poland and Lithuania and across the Holy Roman Empire, though none in France, which will become important to our story later. One historian estimates that 20 to 30% of all bureaucrats in Bavaria were members of the Illuminati by the end. And this is the idea of the original deep state, that they really did have this network, and they welcomed people from all walks of life. So they had literal princes. Being a prince in the Holy Roman Empire with 100 different sovereigns is not actually that big of a deal, but they did have princes, but they also recruited locksmiths, they recruited students and doctors and priests of different faiths. And so they did have a lot of really influential people, especially when Baron von Nigg joined them, because he was just this absolutely amazing networker. He had friends everywhere. He was actually also the Emily Post of the 1700s. Like the word Nigge in German, and I was in Germany this spring and I asked some people, it's equivalent to Emily Post, like by Emily Post, the correct way to do something the Nigge way, because he wrote this etiquette guide that was still in print. I think it still is in print, but it's gone through hundreds of printings since because it was so popular. But unfortunately, so things were going really well for the Illuminati, but unfortunately the scam proved to be its undoing. Weishaupt recruited people who really wanted to learn mystical secrets, which was not unreasonable because that was what we promised them. And when they found that there were none, they were really disenchanted. And so disappointed, and what he was doing was completely illegal. So this proved to be pretty unwise because a lot of these disenchanted recruits went to the Elector of Bavaria, the Prince of Bavaria, and said, hey, these guys are teaching atheism and wanting to team up with Austria and the land swap and any number of things, some of which were true, some of which weren't. But what they were doing was incredibly illegal, and the Elector of Bavaria banned them and raided their homes and seized their most secret papers. And in a really weird turn of fate, a courier for the Illuminati was struck dead by lightning and a membership list was discovered sewn into his coat. Tough break for the Illuminati, let me tell you. So by 1786, it was all over. Weishaupt spent the rest of his life in exile. He initially made these big grand gestures about how he was going to die for his beliefs and blah, 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 but actually he just got to ride out of town and spent the rest of his life writing pamphlets apologizing for the Illuminati. But what was really amazing was that the Elector of Bavaria published the files, or a selection of the files that had been seized from Weishaupt's right-hand man's wife's underwear drawer. And it created this European-wide panic over secret societies and Enlightenment subversion of what they call the church and the altar, church and the state. And it was just an incredible sort of history-defining moment where, for the first time, a secret society's entire secrets had been laid bare. And like the closest thing that we've ever lived through, I would say, would be the DNC hack in 2016, the publication of it, where you just threw an entire society's, private communications out, and a bunch of really overexcited people started essentially group storytelling around these documents that had suddenly been thrown out into the public square, and pretty soon you get Pizzagate, which is the forerunner of conspiracy theory to QAnon, where you look at John Podesta's email recipes and his emails about cheese pizza, and these people decide that they're talking about child porn, and he mentions that he's going to a fundraiser at Comet Ping Pong, which is a beloved family restaurant in DC, and the interpreters decide that means he's trafficking children with Hillary Clinton out of Comet Ping Pong. And this was very much what happened with the Illuminati, that some very overexcitable people, including a guy named Augustin Berruel, who was a former Jesuit priest in France, started writing about how the Illuminati, during the French Revolution, there was a lot of religious repression against Catholics, and he was forced to go into exile in the UK. And he was comfortably ensconced in this little apartment in London that you can still see on Google Maps, that over a cell phone store today. But he wrote this 1,000-page book about how the Illuminati were responsible, along with philosophers, the Freemasons, and the Jacobins for the French Revolution. There's absolutely no evidence for any of this other than the Jacobins. The Illuminati was dead by the time the French Revolution rolled around in 1789. But this book became an international bestseller, and he linked it to a timeless satanic conspiracy theory too, just for good measure. He had this idea that the Illuminati had been directing the course of world events since time immemorial, through the Freemasons and through the Illuminati. And this became this incredibly powerful narrative. It's really the first modern conspiracy theory. People have been accusing each other of covert collective wrongdoing forever. I mean, the Christians accused Nero of burning down Rome to build a palace, and Nero accused the Christians of setting the fire of Rome to do whatever evil Christian things he thought they did. But people have been trading these allegations of conspiracy forever, but what's really new in this modern conspiracy genre is this idea that there's a timeless secret group that's been micromanaging history. And this was Barruel's invention, and a guy called John Robeson in Britain also came up with more or less the same idea, also based off the Illuminati's hidden files. And their books went into multiple printings, they were sold everywhere. They actually have a letter to George Washington, where this minister is writing, "Dear George, have you read Robeson's book? And do you think the Illuminati is active in America?" And Washington's like, "Well, although I don't doubt that the Illuminati is controlling history in Europe, I don't think they're here yet." But this became a really big deal in the election of 1800, when a bunch of conservative ministers in New England decided that Thomas Jefferson was the leader of the atheistic Illuminati in America when he was up against Madison. And he had to defend himself against allegations that he was trying to invade the American South with a group of slaves to rape white women. Like, they decided that the Illuminati had done the Haitian Revolution too, and they were going to therefore invade America and disrupt white chastity. This is a theme that keeps coming back in a lot of these conspiracy theories too. And one of the interesting questions, I think, is the why. It's like, why is it that this is such an appealing idea to conservatives? Why does it keep coming back? And I think it helps explain why a monarch, the French king, who they thought was God's chosen representative on earth, could be removed. And it also helps to discredit democracy, that all these people who think according to the conspiracy theory, that they were standing up for their own rights and their own liberation, were actually being micromanaged by this hidden clique of the Illuminati. And interestingly enough, Barwell, although I think he was pretty anti-Semitic, didn't say anything about the Jews in his book, Memoirs of the History of Jacobinism. That was the title of the book. He didn't say anything about the Jews, perhaps because it was just so obvious that the Jews had nothing to do with the French Revolution. There's not a single prominent Jewish figure anywhere in the French Revolution, really. And but around 1815 or so, this guy named Jean-Baptiste Simonini, who was an obscure Napoleonic mining official, wrote him a letter and said, "Hey, I've gone undercover with the Jews of Torino, and I've uncovered a Jewish Illuminati conspiracy theory." And you can see Barwell's notes on this letter. They're handwritten in the Jesuit archives. Like, oh my God, it makes so much sense. And he wrote a whole second volume of his history blaming the Jews, but then he burnt it because he was greatly afraid it was going to cause a pogrom. So, but this guy Simonini was running this propaganda campaign that reached all the way to the Kremlin and the Vatican. You can see copies of his letters in all those archives today, creating this idea that the Jews and the Illuminati actually did the French Revolution. And you can see that narrative come back in the notorious forgery, the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which was late 19th century forgery that purports to be the minutes of a council of Jews scheming to take over the world in a cemetery in Prague. If you run the world, couldn't you get a nicer room to be? Why are you sitting around the cemetery? But a lot of people who don't know that it's also a Masonic conspiracy theory in there too. Like it's the same. It's recycling, and we don't know exactly whether Simonini was the guy who injected that narrative into the protocol. Whether the idea ultimately came from Simonini or whether other people came up with it too. But it seems likely that he had some influence on that. And this might have died. We might not have been carried forward into the 20th century after the protocols were discredited as being fake if it hadn't been for a woman named Nesta Webster, who was the heiress, who was sort of grind down with conspiracism. She answered her door with a loaded gun because she was so incredibly paranoid. And for someone who spent all her time ranting and raving about Jewish bankers, she was in fact an heir to the Barclays fortune, which I was thinking about as I was walking to the train station today in the shadow of the Barclays Center. The past is not gone. But she had a mystical experience at a chalet in her 20s that convinced her that she was the reincarnation of a figure from the French Revolution. And she started diving back into the conservative histories of the French Revolution, which of course featured the Illuminati very prominently. That the Illuminati had sort of become the dominant conservative explanation for the French Revolution for a century. It was a bit passé by the time she was looking back at those old sources, but there's huge literature on this, and she recaptured it and reinvented it for the modern world and wedded it to the Protocols of the Elders of Zion and published a series of best-selling books that brought this back. And the person who really injected Webster's thoughts into modern discourse later on was the John Birch Society. Do you guys remember them? Yeah.
Someone says they stole our membership book.
What?
Yeah, you guys know Deborah Schwartz.
Yeah.
She says that they stole our membership book in the 60s. I don't know if that's true. I've asked lots of them about it, but that's our conspiracy theory.
Oh my God, that's great. I gotta get more details about that. But Robert Welch, the founder of the John Birch Society, who got together with a group of leading industrialists and academics in 1958 to found this society to combat the international communist conspiracy, eventually decided that while the commies were involved, the real authors of the conspiracy were the Illuminati. And so he goes through this whole long discourse. He calls them the insiders, and he credits Nesta Webster with turning him on to this incredible insight, which caused a lot of sturm and drang inside the John Birch Society because a lot of people really just wanted to fight communism, and they're like, oh, this is weird. We should be talking about Czechoslovakia and the tanks, not the Illuminati, but Birch held firm. And one of the interesting things about the John Birch Society was how it really brought evangelicals into the conservative movement. Guys like Tim LaHaye, the author of the Left Behind books, came up as a John Birch Society organizer. And by the 80s, when he wrote a book called The Battle for the Mind, he identified himself as a 50-year veteran of the battle against the Illuminati. I don't know if any of you guys remember Pat Robertson, the co-founder of the Christian Coalition, his book, The New World Order. almost directly plagiarized from Hester Webster, except it drops the overt references to the Jews. They're just European bankers. By 1965, the John Birch Society was spending twice as much money as the Republican National Committee on political communications. They never really had more than 100,000 members by the most generous estimate, but they are incredibly influential. And as Welch kind of creepily said, our members give their whole lives to us, which is true. Like the average member volunteered between 4 and 40 hours a week. And they believed just incredibly crazy things like that the civil rights movement was entirely a communist plot, that the Vietnam War was a communist plot, as if Moscow tricked the United States into attacking a communist country, which doesn't make a lot of sense, but they believed it. And so it was extremely influential in bringing out this idea of, again, essentially the forerunner of the deep state conspiracy, that people like Dean Acheson and, crazily enough, Eisenhower were communists, and there was this secret state within a state, this brotherhood that was running the country outside of what any democratic institutions really said. That, you know, the elected leaders come and go, but these same guys, these communists, they're running the show behind the scenes. And this ended up being incredibly influential. Alex Jones was descended from Berkshire royalty in Texas, and talks about his obsession with the Illuminati, beginning with the conspiracy theories of the John Birch Society. I don't know if you guys remember Bill Cooper, the radio show, who wrote a version of the conspiracy theory that included the Illuminati and aliens. We got David Icke, the lizard person conspiracy theorist, who also used the Illuminati theory as a backbone for his conspiracy theory. And it is just that every time you open a conspiracy theory book, there's usually a token paragraph about the Illuminati doing the French Revolution, leading to whatever absolutely crazy conclusion that they come to about our modern age. And which brings us to the present day, and the reason that I really became interested in this. I'm writing a book, as Elizabeth said, about how conspiracy theories came to dominate American politics, how they absolutely conquered our discourse, how basically every issue has a corresponding conspiracist discourse. But it's not, our vaccine is good. Is there a conspiracy to impose vaccines? Is fluoride good? Is there a conspiracy? Is abortion good? Is there a conspiracy to reduce the birth rate? And this has become so incredibly mainstream that it's so pervasive that it's almost difficult to see it at times, how much we've changed from the baseline. And I really believe that this idea of the deep state is what brought Donald Trump to power for his second term, because it's hard to remember now, but after January 6th, nobody thought he was going to come back. And the reason he was able to do so was that the deep state narrative turned all his biggest liabilities into strengths. So he came back, he kicked off his campaign at Waco in Texas on the 30th anniversary of the Waco siege, which is a touchstone for conspiracists opposing the tyrannical deep state government. And he got up and he said, "I am your retribution." And he made it sound as if everything that was wrong, all his biggest liabilities were in fact symptoms of the deep state being after him. So all his criminal convictions and civil convictions and all these things, they were actually just proof that he was fighting the good fight against the deep state. And it's kind of interesting that the word deep state had no currency in American politics to describe American stuff until about 2017. And to the point where there was this huge proliferation of explainers in elite publications like the Washington Post and the Atlantic saying, well, what does deep state actually mean? And because Steve Bannon started to use it in the West Wing of the White House, and it was reported that Donald Trump liked the term but was refusing to use it back in 2017 because he felt it made it sound like a crackpot. How far we've come. But the term itself is a borrowed word from the Turkish, Duran Devlet, which refers to an actually very real thing in Turkey, which is that the bureaucracy of the Ottoman Empire was carried over, and it actually did have allegiances with the military and the intelligence services and some really nasty organized crime gangs. So this was actually a real thing that was very well known to everybody. It wasn't a conspiracy theory, but that idea carried over, the metaphor carried over into American politics. And it's just been astonishing to see how much influence that has had over American politics in Trump's second term. the example I want to give, USAID, that was essentially destroying the first things they did upon taking office. And again, it wasn't just about not wanting to spend money, it was based on a full-blown conspiracy theory promulgated by a guy named Mike Benz and Joe Rogan, which absolutely captivated Elon Musk to the point where he decided that Marxists were inside USAID, giving money to America's enemies to spread communism and DEI. So they just destroyed this $63 billion agency, which was keeping 10 million of the world's poorest people alive, essentially overnight, based on a conspiracy theory of the deep state. And it's just astonishing that these tropes have become part of the fabric of our lives, and I wish it had more solutions to offer, but in lieu of a conclusion or a constructive proposal, I want to bring us back to the theme of friendship, free inquiry, and truth. If we hold on to these things, we can start to move forward together. And that's today's presentation. Thank you so much. Oh, actually, does anybody else have any other questions? No.
So I'm going to extinguish our chalice, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment, which we carry in our hearts until we're together again. And Gary is going to lead us in this little night of mine.